I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual now. 起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬、一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传习鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
My talk this morning resulted from a question my daughter Samantha asked, which is, why are people afraid of dying? What makes that such a big deal? How come people worry and fear so much? Now, some of you actually know my daughter Sam, and some of you know of her. For those of you who don't, just a little tiny bit of background. She is probably the most spiritual of my children. There's a story that I tell with great affection of how she caught me doing the rituals one morning when she was about 3 years old. And with no provocation whatsoever, at the end of the morning ritual, she came into me with both hands full of her favorite little toys and doodads, and she brought them up to me. Let's see if I can get through this with a straight face. And she gave me her little handful of her most precious belongings and asked me, "Daddy, do you think the Buddhas would be happy with this?" It was the most precious thing I think I've ever seen in my life. And of course, I held my little 3-year-old daughter very close to me and explained how happy the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas were that such a wonderful offering came from such a pure heart. That's my daughter. That's my daughter who can pick up injured birds, pat bunny rabbits, doesn't get stung by wasps or bees when she handles them, has little wild critters from all over come up to her in the wood. It's almost like the animated Snow White thing, except it's for real, and I've never seen anything like it. I certainly can't do it. And this is my daughter Samantha, who's now 13. She still is deeply spiritual and also deeply involved in the journey of self-discovery and the establishment of her identity and figuring out what she believes and what she feels and who she is and what she wants with her life and all of the wonderful anxiety-causing events that go along with adolescence and growing up. And this is one of them. Over the course of the last 18 months, she has had to face the possibility of her own mortality, as well as the possibility of going blind, and the uncertainty of knowing or not knowing what's going to happen to her from day to day, because she's developed a condition that was originally discovered in her optic nerves. It's a condition that's actually really remarkably rare in pediatrics. I'll spare you the clinical name, but the result is a bunch of calcified deposits in the optic nerve attachment point to the retina that causes a lot of visual affectations and other problems, and is typically caused by highly elevated intracranial pressure. That is, too much pressure within the skull. And so at the ripe old age of 12 and 13, my daughter had to consider the possibility that she might have had a brain tumor or spinal meningitis or some other form of meningitis or some other catastrophic illness that was both going to take her eyesight and possibly kill her. And we had a lot of long and rather emotional discussions about that as she was going through that, as you might well imagine. Because no 13-year-old kid should have to face that question. No 13-year-old child should have to wonder whether or not they're going to be alive tomorrow. That's a horrible thing to go through. I thank everything that I hold holy that her mother and I are on the spiritual path that we're on, because I believe the help that we provided her was what was right and appropriate. The truth of the matter is that our fears drive our behavior. Fear has always driven human behavior. Fear is perhaps second only to hope, as Donald Sutherland says in The Hunger Games, in terms of emotional power and the ability to influence our thoughts and our actions, particularly our fear of the unknown and our fear of pain. Fear influences our decisions because we don't want to get hurt. We don't want to look stupid. We don't want to appear to be unsavory or less than perfect in the eyes of other people. We don't want to be the person who commits the laughable foul up at the office or causes the horrible problem, in the workflow, or any one of a number of other things that we all consider to be mortifying. I share that same catalog full of fears, as do we all. Because of the way that fear drives our behavior, it distorts and manipulates and bends our perceptions. It changes the way that we see things. It changes the way we think about things, because we look at things through that lens, through that filter of perceived pain, embarrassment, and anguish. Fear causes us to distrust other people. There are things that we all have in our lives that we absolutely know if anybody else knew about them, they could never, ever, 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 ever love us again, and neither would anybody else. Those skeletons that we bury so deeply down in the dark recesses of our minds and lives that we hopefully will never bring them into the light of day again. The most mortifying things in the entire whole world that we think render us unworthy of being called human beings. Fear closes off our reason and our common sense. When we're afraid of being discovered for who and what we truly are, we'll do about anything to prevent that from occurring. We will do anything to not be exposed as being less than human and less than worthy. And in the strangulation of common sense and reason comes about prejudice and hatred of individuals and groups of people at whose feet we can lay blame for being the imperfect people that we are. But along with all of those negatives, fear has also helped us to survive as a species. Makes you wonder, huh? This time, several thousand years ago, our fear helped to keep us from being eaten alive by the neighborhood saber-toothed cat, or saber-toothed cat, or whatever that thing was. It's been a long morning already. I have cyber on the brain. That fear kept us from being assaulted by the various and sundry other groups of humanoids that lived around us and all of the predatory animals that lived with us. We still have that primal fear, even though we no longer have the imminent possibility of fatal or near fatal risk. We still carry within us the adrenaline response, fight or flight. You scare somebody real bad and they shake for 20 minutes. because their body releases adrenaline in preparation to either run for the hills or fight for their lives. We all still have a hypothalamus, the part of the brain that is the most primitive and most primal. It hasn't gone away or been suppressed. It has simply been overtopped by a large layer of gray matter that takes on higher functions. The autonomic functions are still firmly nested in the primitive brain, where we don't have to think about them. Our body just does them. Try not to blink your eyes for 20 minutes or not breathe for half an hour. Your body will convince you that those two activities are a bad idea. I tend to agree. There's another side to fear, one that's been capitalized on for as long as civilizations have been in existence, and that is the knowledge that fear begets spirituality and spiritual thinking. Fear has been a method of controlling the masses for as long as there have been people. Various and sundry kinds, to be sure, and various and sundry degrees of effectiveness. I'm not sure that Roman hedonism quite measured up to the Spanish Inquisition, but winding up in the arena as tonight's entertainment with lions, I'm sure had a pretty profound effect on the Christians back then. And still, religion is a method of control and a method of influencing behaviors and thought processes in people. Fear of the afterlife and the punishment or glorification that supposedly comes along with it is a huge motivator, behaviorally speaking, for the faithful in any spiritual path where that is an item of their dogma and their teachings. It feeds religious fervor and extremism. On both sides, or I should say all sides, of the ideological fence, Islamic extremists are told of a palace in heaven with 72 virgins, and we're told about streets that are lined with gold and a palatial home right next door to God's, where Jesus lives with us 24/7, and eventually that paradise brought down here on earth. The thing that I find remarkably interesting in the paths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is that all three of those religious and spiritual paths originate in the very same person, Abraham, the father of nations mentioned in the Old Testament, is the progenitor of all three of those faiths. And yet, in our fervor and our belief and our faith and our zeal, we're out there killing each other just as fast as we can possibly get it done. Do we live in fear? Yeah. Fear of punishment reins in the behaviors and the aberrancies of human nature in some cases, but it breeds secrecy and deception in people who don't want to get caught with their dark little thoughts and desires. It's regrettable that we can't do what's right just because it's right. And yeah, because of that, we live in fear. I'm afraid, and sometimes very palpably, that my 13-year-old daughter will be yanked off the streets by somebody that she can't protect herself from. I go to great lengths to make sure that never happens. She has a cell phone that I can pin down to within 3 feet from 1,000 miles away. I did that on purpose, just in case. Is that a rational fear? I don't know, probably not. But she's my baby and I love her. I train my kids in martial sciences so that if somebody tries to hurt them, they can defend themselves. Do I ever want for them to have to? Of course not. but I don't want them to ever be caught unaware or off guard. Do we live in fear? You bet. Yes, we do. Do we fear the unknown more than anything? The unknown is the ultimate fear. The fear of death and dying, our mortality. I would ask all of you right now, do you fear death? Are you afraid of dying one day? And if you are, why? And if you're not, how come? This is a question Samantha asked me. Why are people afraid to die, Dad? I understand why people are afraid to die in some spiritual paths and pursuits, because the supposition that that death event is followed by some kind of glorification or eternal punishment is pretty doggone scary. And I'm not going to tell you guys what you should or shouldn't believe, or how you should or shouldn't believe. That is so not my place. And I'm not going to pretend to have the knowledge, wisdom, or clairvoyance to understand how you all feel. For me, I find the absence of a personified deity and any kind of eternal glorification or punishment to be comforting. I find for myself that my spiritual path is a tremendous help in laying aside the fears of the unknown. I find that understanding that death is just a part of living is a huge help to not worrying about what may happen to a soul that's going to leave this body one day, sooner than later. I find it difficult to comprehend that an omniscient, all-powerful, all-loving God could cast his own creation into a lake of eternal fire for all eternity. That's one of the reasons that I did not become a Southern Baptist minister way back when. But I can't argue it as a point of fact. It's strictly a matter of faith. So, can I tell you to believe in it or not believe in it? No. I choose rather to believe that this existence is a series of lessons and a series of choices, followed by most likely another series of lessons and choices, because that cyclical nature makes sense to me. I see it all over nature. I see it in the heavens and on the earth. I see it in the way that everything around me moves. Nothing in this existence goes in a straight line and then disappears forever. Nothing. Everything gets recycled in one way or another. Why shouldn't we? Just a thought. So what's the Tao-centered approach on death and dying and killing and all that ugliness? Well, basically it's a detached, non-emotional understanding that dying is a part of living, that one day everything that lives will die. Not out of malice or hate or universal disdain, but simply because that is the nature of living. And if things did not die, pretty soon this planet would be overrun with very, very, very old animals and people. There's a process of rebirth and renewal that occurs with every death that brings the planet around new and fresh again every time it happens. Only human beings have had the wherewithal to alter the rate and manner in which that process occurs. And that's something that we're going to need to change one of these days if we want the earth to continue to survive. But the process itself remains unaltered and will remain unaltered for as long as the earth continues to spin in the heavens. Does that seem harsh and uncaring, perhaps? Maybe. But to me, it's a whole bunch less harsh than winding up in a lake of burning fire for my sinful and disgusting past. Even now, as I attempt to refine my own spirituality, I fall way short of the demands of most Judeo-Christian faiths. That's why I keep telling you guys I'm nobody's master and nobody's guru. I can't do it myself. What makes you think I'm going to exhort you all to do it? I simply do the best I can and hope I can help somebody along the way somewhere. See, maybe best summed up, we all need to be aware of our fears and our anxieties and the effect they have on us, because our fears and our anxieties drive the way we think and the way we behave and the things that we do to other people. And at a person-to-person level, that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's where it counts, is how it affects our relationships and what we do to and with those around us. We should be careful to remember that the Tao path is not a path of malice or glorification, but simply a way of nature. And use that knowledge to temper our fears and to bring knowledge and wisdom to the understanding of the unknown and the processes of life. To understand that death is a natural part of living and nothing to be feared. It's just one more experience on the road to hopefully one day being enlightened. Because ultimately there's a Buddha inside each of us waiting for an opportunity to get out. Thanks a whole bunch for letting me share with you this morning, and you all have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday. Thank you.
Hey, Bill, thank you. I want to recall to mind the fact that I met Stan in person when she was, I think, like 2 years old.
Yes.
So I can definitely understand what you're talking about. She's a very special person.
Yes, she is.
And in fact, I have to say, I am not as spiritual as she is to the core. So, I have to work on my own fear, much more so, for something that she handles naturally. And speaking of life and death, I also want to say, Bill, that it's very interesting to me. I received a question this week from my friend David, who asked about reincarnation. My own position on it, and also yours. And this is because David, having heard our talks, he knows that you and I are sort of the kind of people who would not believe anything lightly. We would need to observe and form our own opinions, and we're not likely to be swayed by whatever beliefs appear to be popular at the time. So he wanted to find out about that. And my response to him was that, well, if other people are also asking, then I'll just create some slides and I'll respond to the question publicly. However, nobody else is asking that same question, so I will just send David an email to respond. Lo and behold, here you are in your presentation. talking about life being cyclical, about how there are no straight lines anywhere in reality, and how everything in nature is being recycled. So why not us? So it seems to me like you're responding to the question.
Well, you and I have a history of those sorts of things happening.
Right. So if you were to answer David's question about your own personal belief in reincarnation, would you respond? Would that pretty much be the way that you would answer the question?
Yes, I firmly believe in reincarnation of some description. I don't know exactly how it works mechanically or what the process is, but I find it very difficult to believe that we wind up at the end of our lives and that's it. I'm positive that there's something that happens that recycles the human spirit, just as everything else in the universe is recycled in some way.
Yeah. So I feel the same way. The way that I say it is that as I look at the world, I see this nature that is so incredibly intricate, and yet nothing in nature is wasted ever. Everything is
Yeah,
going through transformations in one way or another. Um, these molecules that make up everything we see, they have different uses continuously. Something is burnt up to give heat and warmth and light, and the ash that remains fertilize plants, and so on and so on. Nothing in nature is ever wasted. Nothing anywhere is ever wasted for anything. So when I see existence like that, like such a perfect system, I have to ask, so what about human consciousness? What about the wisdom that you have acquired throughout your life? What about the lessons that you have learned? If everything just disintegrates into oblivion, I would think that represents a tremendous waste of the accumulated experiences that you've had. So then the question I have to ask is, well, why? Why did it get wasted like that when nothing else is wasted? If it's really true that this is all that we have, this is it, then the question that I have to ask is, why is this the only exception that I
to
can
what
find
appears to be a
anywhere?
universal law.
Right, exactly. So while I don't know how any kind of reincarnation works, um, on principle, it's not something that I can dismiss.
Yeah. You're familiar with the laws of the conservation of information and conservation of energy as well. I know you are.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
those two things say that no information can be lost, no energy can be lost. So that waste can't occur. It has to be recycled somewhere. It has to be.
So anyhow, those thoughts, help me in my own fashion deal with the fear of death. And there's also something else that I want to touch on. When you speak of when you talk about Sam, I think we can all feel this love that just emanates from you. The love for her, your daughter, who I have to tell everyone, having met her in person, she is very easy to love. Um, so it reminds me, I always used to ask people this question. I would say, what is the fundamental opposite of love? I would ask people this question. And in fact, those that are listening to us right now, I would also challenge you with the same question. If I were to ask you this question, what is the fundamental opposite of love? how would you respond to that? It seems like a simple question.
Are you asking me?
Well, I guess I'm putting the question out to everyone. So anyone
Okay.
who cares to answer can just, type it in to the GoToMeeting software. And of course, a lot of people will simply say, well, hate is the opposite of love. Many people say that. And that's when I push back a little bit on that. And I say that, well, I'm asking for the fundamental opposite of love. Now, although hate is something that we can all agree is a very significant factor in human history, we see it all the time, we see it in our world, hate is not something to be dismissed lightly, and yet hate is not fundamental. Why do I say that? Well, I say it because hate is always caused by something else. That is, there's a underlying basis for hate. What is that basis? Well, when you dig deeply enough, you always find that behind every hatred, there's fear.
Yep.
So people are used to thinking about love and hate. So they're not used to thinking about love and fear. Interesting. Now, is love fundamental? Well, I have to say so. I think it's fundamental to humanity. When I think about love, then I ask the question, is there something else that causes it? Is there something that's the basis of it? When I look at the essence of humanity, I pretty much have to say, well, the essence is love. Love is what causes love. I can't break it down any more than that. So love is fundamental. And fear is also fundamental. Fear for so many things. Fear for our own survival, fear for the safety of other people, etc. Whatever fear, whenever fear manifests out of control, is the beginning of hatred. So that is actually useful knowledge, because whenever, and this is how I counsel people, whenever I experience the fear, fear of death, let's focus on that because that's what we're talking about today. Whenever there's fear of death, the powerful antidote, the powerful cure for that is to shift your focus to love instead. Love is light. It's illumination. Fear is darkness. Light banishes that darkness. So if you find yourself overcome, fearing the possibility of death, I would urge you to shift your focus, your attention to love, and you will find that the illumination banishes the darkness and the fear dissipates naturally. For those people that have received the Tao and have received the three treasures, you will recognize everything that I'm talking about as immediately applicable to the third treasure, the third and last treasure, the hand seal, which is a representation of nurturing love. So that can be a powerful reminder for you when you are dealing with that fear. In fact, I will say that the three treasures can be used together whenever you feel that overwhelming sense of fear, fear of death, fear of mortality. If you use the three treasures, I guarantee you will find that to be the most powerful method imaginable to elevate yourself to the level of a spiritual being like Samantha. Okay, Bill, to relate to you from Alex, wonderful talk, Bill, and your daughter's personal story really drove your point home. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
So observation from Julie, Samantha is an old soul. She may only be 13, but that's not necessarily the age of her soul, is it?
Absolutely not.
And so BB says, great point. Carolyn's observation, hate includes ignoring the suffering of others. Very true. And Marianne, we want to love too. It comes naturally. Absolutely, Marianne. And that is why I say that it is so fundamental to human nature, to the essence of humanity. From Julie, fear blocks a natural flow of loving energy and the creative force of life. Yeah, see, it makes perfect sense to me because, they're opposites to one another. And where there's fear, love cannot reside. That's absolutely true because of their opposing relationship, connection. And from Chris, it's more of an apathetic attitude where you do not care for anything. That would be the opposite of love. So good observation there, Chris. And also from Julie, love is the opposite of love. I absolutely agree, obviously. And from Susanna, reincarnation is something that I can and always have felt possible. It makes sense. What would be the point of learning and living if there's nothing for us, if nothing to use that knowledge on in a later life? So Susanna, that's the way that I imagine it. That's the way that I represent it in my mind. And I think that what we learn, some of that become internalized, changing us as a person, changing our nature, and we take that changed, hopefully improved nature onward and forward in time and space. And from Pam, Bill, thank you for sharing the essence of Samantha with us.
Thank you, guys.
And great point from BB is that love is the motivating force of the universe. Wow. Okay. Bill, you probably did not expect that your talk would have such a big impact.
No, but I'm always happy when it does.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架规则是一鞠躬，接班一鞠躬。Okay, everybody, we are done.
Participate in the Tao meeting by joining us online. For information, go to Taoism.net/Tao